Welcome everybody. My name's Scott Hubbard from Spark Systems, and today we're looking at our webinar topic entitled Step Beyond Static Views with Scriptlets in Enterprise Architect 16. So how can you create engaging diagrams capable of responding to user and system changes? Well, today we're going to take a step beyond static views with the use of scriptlets in Enterprise Architect 16. A brand new element containing JavaScript that allows you to tap into the underlying diagram and element API. We're going to look at how to bring models to life by altering elements' appearance and text. So what are scriptlets? Well, scriptlet elements contain JavaScript. And they allow you to tap into the underlying diagram and element API. This allows you in turn to customize the element's appearance, text, tag values, and other properties on the fly. And we're going to demonstrate all of that today in Enterprise Architect 16. Scriptlets run whenever a diagram is loaded or can be run manually on demand. If you have a look at the toolbox on screen, you can see that they're under dynamic viewpoints. You can simply drag a scriptlet and put it on any diagram. Scriptlets are available from the toolbox under dynamic viewpoints, and the code in scriptlets cannot alter or update elements in the model database. It can, however, read and update copies of the elements that are displayed on a diagram. And we're going to look at a number of different examples today. There's some example JavaScript on screen. So you can see we're accessing a grid and we're using session.output, and we're updating a background color and a font color. So scriptlets, what are some other things that you can do with them? Well, you can run a scriptlet, you can edit and test a scriptlet, and you can debug a scriptlet. And I'm going to show you how to debug scriptlets today. So just like normal code, you can insert breakpoints, you can view local variables, you can use watches to observe changes to variables, and you can step over or into each line of code using Enterprise Architect 16's built-in debugger. So it's really quite powerful. Some of the things that we're going to look at today are some trig functions. So we're going to look at cosine, and we're going to change the appearance of a requirement, a discussion, and a review element. We're going to look at grid style diagrams and use scriptlets to add up some totals and change some background colors. Grid style diagrams are also new in Enterprise Architect 16. You can bring up properties of a diagram and enable grid style diagrams. And then you can simply insert the number of rows and columns that you want and set the width and height of each cell and show the grid as appropriate. So I'm going to just show you how to do that because some of our examples rely on grid style diagrams. And if you haven't used Enterprise Architect 16 before, you might not have seen it. So you can see from diagram properties, I enabled grid style and I've set the number of columns, and I'm going to show the headings. So as you can see, the A1, A2, A3, so the columns are represented up the top, and you have all of your rows that are numbered appropriately. So what we're going to start off with is we're going to look at how to change the appearance of diagram elements using scriptlets. So scriptlets, as I mentioned, use JavaScript, and you can very easily access things such as the font color, the background color, and other elements. So let's have a look at that now. So on screen we have a very simple grid, and you can see that every single cell has a different color and a background color for the cell. Now we're using white for the font for all of them. Now that's actually A1, B1, C1, and of course A1, 2, 3, and 4 are the columns. So if you double click on the scriptlet element, it will bring up the code in the code editor. Now what I've done is I've removed the comments for how to reset, and you can see that the JavaScript increments R and C in order to count the rows and various columns, and it resets the color. So if I right click on a scriptlet, you can see it's very easy to edit, run, and debug scripts. And in this particular instance, we're going to run the script, and you can see that it resets the color for each cell. So the cell colors have now been reset, and they are now all white. If I double click the other scriptlet, here we can see various colors, and all these colors are defined within the script. So you have beige and chocolate and coral and dark blue, dark cyan, dark red. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of these colors and update. So I'm just going to pause here briefly. So we're going to stop and reset the script, and we're going to run that. And what we're going to do is we're going to update the colors of these cells now. So you can stop the script for the reset function, and I'm going to right click, and now I'm going to run the script. And you can see that all the colors change accordingly. So this is quite powerful because what it allows you to do is to take every single element on the screen and to change features such as color. So if I just stop here briefly, you can see that you have a function called background color test, and currently you're setting the color for 1A, 1B, 1C. So remember that A, B, C, and D represent the various columns, and the first number represents each row. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the color for the first row and the first column, which is column A, and it's currently going to be set to white. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to update some of these colors just so you can see how it works. I'm not going to do the whole lot. I'll just do, beige, chocolate, dark red, and maybe do 3 or 4 so that you can see how it works. Now, you may note that in some of these, the variable name color uses COLOUR. That's obviously been done by Australians, and we spell color with OUR. But within Enterprise Architect 16, we also have color as COLOR in some of the function names. So that's a trick for new players. So if we run, you can see we've now got beige, chocolate, dark red, and some of those other colors, and we've been able to update. In Enterprise Architect 16, we've also introduced a new JavaScript console. So JavaScript console is a command line interpreter that accepts single line JavaScript commands that can be executed one at a time. So you type the commands into the bottom, and all of the results appear up the top of the console. In order to access it, you go Specialize, Tools, and JavaScript. The online help that we're looking at now has a range of commands, and we're going to test some of those now. So I click the Specialize ribbon, go to Tools, select JavaScript, and bring up the JavaScript console. So the first thing I'm going to do is run var x is equal to 6. And so what we've now done is we've set the variable x equal to 6 and entered that into the console. One line at a time, we're now going to set the variable y equals to 7. Now the next line I've got is session output, and we're saying the variable is equal to, and I'm going to say plus x. Now please note that JavaScript is case sensitive, so if you do session output all in lowercase, it's not going to work. And I discovered this myself when I was recording the webinar, and so it's very important that you remember that it's case sensitive. So you can see we've got session.output while the variable y is equal to y, and that simply outputs to session.output, which displays in the console. If we're running this in a scriptlet, that would appear in the session output window, and I'll show you how to access the session window later. So here I've got a zoomed in version of JavaScript console, and you'll note that some of the defined terms are displayed in blue. I'm just using the up and down arrow keys to execute previous commands. So question mark X is going to simply print that out to session.output, and I can access help. So you can see I can clear a window, I can save to a text file, I can access help, I can close the console, and I can print to the console, and I can also include a script. So I've been able to save that element. So the JavaScript console is there so that it allows you to quickly run and execute commands so that you can test things before you put them into your scriptlet and to run the code. So let's have another look at how to change appearance. Once again, we have our columns represented by A and B, and our rows are 1, 2, and 3. Now, this particular example doesn't just look at a grid, but it looks at how to update a requirement and other elements, such as a change element and things like that. Now, I'm using QEA, which is the new Enterprise Architect 16 file format. And here from the model pattern, I'm going to select to create a model using a simple scriptlet. Now, all the examples that I'm using today are all available within the model wizard, so you can get them and try them out for yourself. So you can see on screen, in column A, we have a requirement, we have a discussion, and we have a review element. I'm going to access the design from the start menu in order to bring up system output. So any text that publishes or pushes things out to system output will be displayed on that screen. I can double click a scriptlet element or right click and select edit script in order to edit that text. Please note that all the items in green are represented by a comment, and that helps to describe and explain what's going on in the code. We're using a command called get object by grid, and you can see that the column is listed first, followed by the row. Once again, in our code, we define all of our colors, and we've done that just to make life easier so that you don't need to understand the hexadecimal values or how Enterprise Architect represents colors themselves. You can simply copy and paste all of these colors and use them in your diagrams with these. You can see we set up a variable object for our EA diagram object, and we say the scriptlet for diagram name. We set the background color, and it was orange, and I'm now going to make that beige, and you can set object.font color. So if I now run this script with those changes, you can see the background's been set to beige, and the font color is white, so there's not a high degree of contrast there, but it's really just to showcase that you can change a model element with ease. The next example I'm going to look at is some geometry and look at some trig functions. So you've got sine, cos, and tan. So when I was younger, I used to say, if you play soccer, you hurt your toe, so I could always remember the sine. Cos equals adjacent over hypotenuse, and tan equals opposite over adjacent. I still remember that to this day. And we're going to use those trig functions in order to calculate an angle on a triangle, and based on the length of the adjacent and hypotenuse, we can calculate the angle. So essentially, we're going to be using Enterprise Architect to calculate some of these trig functions and process it on screen. So hopefully people are aware. You can see you've got our trig functions there, and we can process that. So some of the things that we've talked about so far is we've looked at the JavaScript console, we've looked at how to edit JavaScript, we've looked at how to create code, we've looked at some simple command line functions, and we've also looked at how to access some of the help features. And now we're going to have a look at some trig functions. And I think I've got our cosine example on screen now. So geometry is all about shapes and their properties. And in this particular example, we're looking at trigonometry, and you can see that you have the hypotenuse and adjacent angles on the left, and trigonometry helps us to find angles and distances. We have a scriptlet that calculates the angle based on the hypotenuse and adjacent, and you'll note that the number 19 is stored in the notes and the angle is stored. So given the hypotenuse and the adjacent values, we can quickly calculate the angle. So I'm going to change 19. I'm going to make a change and then run the script. And so I changed it to 22. And if I right click and I select run the script, we can now run our scriptlet code. And you can see the angle is now 78 degrees. So here's an example where we're using mathematics and scriptlets and trigonometry and geometry in order to give us a in-depth usage of scriptlets within Enterprise Architect. And I can make changes to the hypotenuse and run it, and that's relatively easy. Next thing I want to do is have a look at being able to debug scriptlets. So you can see that the text is sent to the system output, and it says that the diagram exists, the elements exist, and the instance exists, and this needs to be true in order for us to run. And we simply output how we're calculating the result, and we send the message. So you can see there's a couple of if statements there. So if the diagram exists, we say the diagram exists. If the element exists, we say the element exists. And finally, if the instance exists, we say that it exists. But what would be good is if we could actually go through and debug this code. So one of the great things about Enterprise Architect is that you can simply right-click in the script to easily insert a breakpoint. Then once you've inserted your breakpoint, you can use things such as locals and watches in order to view variables so that you can see what's happening in your code. So you can see we've set up variables here for the hypotenuse, the adjacent, and the angle, and we get these details, and we simply get hypotenuse.notes and adjacent.notes and store that in the variable. And the parseInt simply converts that text value into a number, so we can calculate it using our code. So while it looks complicated, basically we're just taking the number out of the hypotenuse and the number out of the adjacent fields and using that in order to calculate our angle. Now, the red dot that we created before was our breakpoint. And so now, rather than running the script, I'm going to select the debug the script, and execution is halted on my breakpoint, which is represented by the red dot. And on the right-hand side, I've added a watch for the variable Z and adjacent, and you can see at the moment, these values aren't found because we haven't run them yet. So as I step over each line of code, you'll note that both the adjacent and Z values will come up as I step over the code, and you can see that adjacent is now valued at 22 and Z is now the angle of 63. So what's really good is that you can step through your code, you can add watches for various variables, you can see when they change, and the debug items down there also allow you to see anything that's printed to session.output. So it really gives you a great deal of flexibility to be able to manage, edit, and review your code. So I'm now going to add another model wizard. So we've looked at the geometry example and a simple example, and now we're going to have a look at a quick spreadsheet example to show how Enterprise Architect 16 can create a grid and a spreadsheet and can add numbers and can set the background color accordingly. So you can see we have numbers there such as 104. So just like any spreadsheet, if I update those numbers, then the script will automatically sum each row, and then it sums all of the totals for a subtotal. And if we run the script, you can see that it automatically updates those numbers accordingly. So not only can you perform mathematical functions such as trig functions, but you can also create a spreadsheet within Enterprise Architect 16 that will sum rows and sum columns and perform mathematical functions and be able to calculate items that are relevant to the particular diagram. So you can see I'm just making changes on screen, and I'm simply running the scriptlet, and it sums items. Now you can, of course, and you will have noticed that some scriptlets will run automatically the minute a diagram is loaded, and you can also do it so that you need to click a scriptlet and run it in order to make it work. In this particular example, once again, we define all the colors so that they're easy to use. We have the same script where we check to see whether the diagram, the element, and the instance exists, and we publish the results of that to session output or to the system output. So you can see it says the diagram exists, the element exists, and as I run the script and I bring up the system output window, you can see that it updated 15 cells for 6 rows and the runtime was 1 second. So not only can you perform calculations and sum and perform mathematical functions, but you can also calculate how long the runtime is for a particular object. So if we have a look at the code, the first function tells us, whether the diagram or the element and the instance exists. The next function sets variable start time, end time, and it gets start time from new date. And then there's a function called end time, end timer. So it looks at the time difference. So it takes the start time from the end time, and then we strip off the milliseconds in order to display that time, and we round that off and publish it on screen. So that's where you say runtime is equal to 1 second, and the fill basically adds each row and then performs the subtotals in order to calculate the total. And down the bottom there's a simple variable which sets the currency style to US dollars and publishes that accordingly. So what's really good about these examples that are included with Enterprise Architect 16 is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Within the model wizard, there are examples of working spreadsheets, there's examples of working mathematical functions, there's examples that show you how to change the background color, the font color, the color of the grid, and show you some working code so that you can get up and running and see how scriptlets work, and have fully completed examples that you can put into your models with just a few clicks, and then you can modify and update accordingly. So we're quite happy that there's so many examples in Enterprise Architect 16 that you can use and interact with and get used to. So in the webinar today, we've looked at a number of different things in scriptlets. We've looked at some JavaScript code. We've looked at the JavaScript console. We've used our scriptlets in order to change the appearance of an element. We've used scriptlets in order to perform trig functions. We've looked at how to run, stop, and edit scriptlets. We've looked at how to modify the background colors of cells. We've looked at the new grid style diagrams and how to implement those. And we've also looked at the debugger, and we've been able to insert a breakpoint. So the next thing that we're going to look at is risk taxonomy. So I'm just going to pause here briefly. So this particular diagram has a legend on the left-hand side, and you can see there are two colors, red and aqua. Now the aqua color indicates if some of the tagged values for this particular threat capability or this particular element are incomplete. If an element on the diagram is red, then it indicates whether some aspects of that particular tagged values for that element are missing. And of course, if the element is blank or white, then we know that it's okay. Now, where you might use this is if you were modeling something in Enterprise Architect and you knew that your system specifications simply were not compliant unless every element on a diagram was complete, then you could use this scriptlet and this kind of color coding approach so that you could quickly test and check every element on screen to make sure that it was complete. So with this particular example, we're looking at a threat-based community pattern, and we're using color coding so that we can quickly see if any of the elements have missing or incomplete tagged values. So given that, if we have a look at the first threat event frequency, we also have a vulnerability, and you'll see the properties are on the right-hand side. Now, with this one that's listed in red, you can see that none of the confidence level, the maximum likely value, the minimum likely value, the most likely value, and the rating, all of these things were left blank, which is why all of the things were missing and it was highlighted in red. So now if I run the script, now that I've updated it, you can see that this element is no longer red because the elements aren't missing. If I take one value, such as the minimum likely value, and I remove that, and now I run my script again, you can see it is now highlighted in the blue aqua color to show that that is incomplete. Now you can see the vulnerability simply has a single rating, which is high, low, medium, and because that has been set, this particular item is complete. I've got session output down the bottom, so you can see that it's also saying that vulnerability is a risk element, and vulnerability has a completed set of tagged values. So it's also, not only is it giving you a visual indication, but the code is actually outputting information to the system or session.output in order to tell us what's going on with our script. So once again, we set up a variable that identifies our different risk stereotypes. And we have one for threat capability, for resistance strength, and for vulnerability, and for threat capability, and they're all listed there. We've manually defined all of our colors once again, and you can see there's a print function that prints information to session.output, and it prints X, and we fill X with the details where we say the item.stereotype is a risk element or it's not, using a very simple if statement. We check once again if the diagram element and instance exists, and there's some tests here that we check to make sure that everything's working, and you can uncomment out in order to get some more details published to the screen. So one of the things that you'll find with Enterprise Architect 16 and the script editor is that the script editor is very easy to use. It does autocomplete when you're typing, so that makes it very easy as a software developer to write your code. And there may be some people that have used the script editor in the past to write C or C++ or Java, but it's very nice to be able to write the scriptlets in JavaScript and to be able to do that all within Enterprise Architect 16. So in conclusion, I'd just like to talk about some of the things that we've covered today. So we've looked at how you can take a static diagram and move beyond it. We've looked at things like how to debug scripts, how to change the appearance of scripts. We've looked at geometry and trigonometry and mathematical functions and risk taxonomy. And we've seen how to update a table, how to use grid style elements within Enterprise Architect, and how to manage the appearance of diagram elements. So we've packed a lot in there, and some of the examples that we've looked at today have in fact been using scriptlet model wizard examples that ship with Enterprise Architect 16. So I know I've covered a lot in a short amount of time, so this webinar will be made available on YouTube shortly, and that will allow you to pause the video and have a look at the code and perhaps have Enterprise Architect 16 downloaded and running so you can implement the scriptlets yourself and see how they work and go from there. So I might just jump over to any questions that we might have. So the first question is just how can I get access to Enterprise Architect 16? So first of all, if you'd like a free 30-day trial, you can go to sparksystems.com and you can download the free 30-day trial to test that. There's another question about the examples that I've used today. How do I access them? So basically, for each of the examples, I was selecting root element, I was right-clicking, and I was just adding a model pattern using a model wizard. And if you do a search for scriptlets, all of the examples in this webinar are available from there. I've got another question here saying, what's the difference between having a diagram script and using a scriptlet? So the scriptlet doesn't edit elements in the underlying database. So a scriptlet uses JavaScript, so it uses a different type of code, and a scriptlet can be run the minute a diagram loads. So you can parse all of the information, you can change the appearance of all the elements, you can add all of the columns and all of the rows, and you can perform mathematical functions upon opening and using a particular diagram. So as the diagram loads, all of that can be done in the background and can be processed. And so it can render the information on the diagram as that diagram loads, and You can do things such as, use a diagram legend to highlight any elements on the screen that are incomplete, or you can add rows, you can add columns. So the scriptlets are completed using JavaScript, and scriptlets are something that's new with Enterprise Architect 16, and probably easier to get into your diagram and to use. And you can, of course, you still have access to your diagram scripts and your API, and you still have all of that, but now you have the added bonus of being able to access scriptlets as well. There's another question that's asking about being able to access previous webinars. So if you go to sparksystems.com/webinars, you can look at all of our previous webinars, and some of the Q&A will be made available for that, and you can respond and have a look at some of our previous webinars. And we hope to, over the next few weeks, bring to you more webinars on Enterprise Architect 16, and look forward to bringing those to you. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to wrap up this webinar. I'd like to thank everyone very much for their attendance and for your questions, and hope that you learned something new about scriptlets and Enterprise Architect 16. And we encourage you to download the free 30-day trial and try it out for yourselves, and have a look at some of the scriptlet examples that we've shown you today. So thank you once again. Take care, look after yourself, and we'll see you at the next Enterprise Architect 16 webinar over the coming weeks and months. And if you have any questions or any further topic ideas that you'd like on Enterprise Architect 16, simply email us at webinar@sparksystems.com, and we're always happy for your feedback. And it's great hearing from our customers and seeing what they do with scriptlets, and finding out more. So with that, I'll leave you. Take care, and see you next time.